Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter for the Monday Morning Quarterback, joining us on the program. All right, your unbiased perch last night watching this game with the taunting call. What did you make of that, Albert?
I mean, I think it's ridiculous the way they're calling these. Could Cassius Marsh have done a little bit more to prevent that situation for himself? I mean, the flying leg kick and then just sort of stare down on the other sideline. I mean, I think if you're, Matt Nagy today, you're probably telling your players in a teaching point, like, I don't agree with the rule, but like, if they're calling this, just, if you're going to celebrate, don't make eye contact with anybody on the opponent. You know what I mean? Like, so, I think Cassius Marsh did everything he could to avoid it? No. But like, you add it to kind of the hip check there, which I'm sure you've seen that. And everything else, it just feels like this is not being consistently enforced across the league. And it feels like, and I like, look, going into the season, Dan, I really thought like this is going to take them 2, 3, 4 weeks to work it out and to figure out where that line is. And here we are, and it's week 9, and it still feels like people don't have a full understanding of what's going to get called and what isn't going to get called.
Okay, but it felt like Tony Correnti, the official, initiated some contact here with.
No, it did.
And plus, he doesn't throw the flag where there is an obvious taunt, but then he throws it like right after they, nudge into one another. Like, now
there's
I'm going to
retaliation.
Yes. Yeah. It felt like he missed the taunting penalty and then almost waited and then threw the flag after, they made contact with one another.
Yeah, and if you're the league, the last thing you can do is have the idea out there that your officials are engaging in anything that becomes in any way personal at all with any player or coach, right? Like they're supposed to be the ones that are out there that are not emotional, that are looking at the game from a down the middle perspective and aren't letting anything anybody says get to them. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if there was some sort of altercation between Marsh and the official and Tony earlier in the game. Or if like just Tony got his back up about like the flying leg kick and stare down, but like it did feel like there was something personal there because it absolutely looked intentional. And look, the league's had a lot of problems with officiating in the last couple of years. And I think that there's a little bit more to Al Riveron, winding up out than met the eye. And it feels to me like this is something they can't just let it go. When
does the NFL respond today?
Like they don't always respond right away, but they might get it out there. The way the NFL would respond in a situation like this, normally, if it were a player, right, is they would say, we're looking into it, right? Like, so they would at least get it out there and let the public know this is something we're not like just brushing over. We're looking into it. And then usually with the players, the way it works is that by the end of the week, they've sent the FedEx out to the guy. And that at that point, the news gets out of whatever happened to the player or coach, whoever was involved in it. And so, like, you would think that it would probably be the same process here where the NFL gets something out on Tony Correnti, say, we're looking into this and we're talking to him about this. And then if there was going to be any sort of sanctions, I think they'd probably be later in the week after they talk to everybody.
What happens to Mac Jones after the shoestring tackle?
Leg twist.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what's funny is like he comes off as like he almost comes off as like Opie in his press conferences, I mean, like you hear him talk publicly and he just seems like you're like, I don't know any better way to put it than like, he kind of like sounds like he's stoned when he talks, you know what I mean? Like, and so he seems very kind of like passive, but you hear all of these legendary stories about how competitive he is. Right. Like, and I remember talking to some scouts in the spring about how, the Alabama people would tell him he would get into it with Nick Saban when he was running the scout team. And like yell, like trash talk Nick Saban about the way his defense was playing against Mac, who was Tua's backup at the time. And so I think that this is probably like a combination of Mac not knowing exactly what had happened because he had just gotten hit there and probably being a little bit overly competitive in the moment. That said, the fact that the defensive player was injured on this play, right, and the fact that he suffered an ankle injury, I think the NFL has to look at this and say, if the roles were reversed and a quarterback got hurt in a play like this, what would happen? Yeah. Right. That's why I think they've got a problem on their hands. And that's why I think they probably have to find Mac Jones, because that'd be a legal play. That would be a legal play if Brian Burns had the ball in his hands, but he didn't. And the twist at the end, I think you could certainly say Mac had enough time there while he was on the ground to figure out, seeing people running past him, that Brian Burns probably didn't have the ball.
Odell Beckham Jr., does he find out where he's going today?
I don't think he gets claimed today. And I could be wrong about that, but for another team to claim him at this point, it's $7.25 million. They have a settlement agreement with the Browns where he'll, he gets termination pay. I won't get into the weeds in it, but he gives $3 million back to the Browns if he winds up clearing waivers. I think he probably will not get claimed. I mean, there are a couple teams in there that are on that list that have enough money to claim him that are sort of interesting to me. The one that you really look at is Seattle, just because Pete Carroll's already addressed it publicly. They've tried to show Russell Wilson, like, we're all in for you to make it happen with you right now. And I think the Seahawks have to reckon with the possibility too, that this might be it for them with Russell Wilson. Right. And so if this is it for them with Russell Wilson, what's the harm in going and, burning the cap space that you have on a player that's going to, be his best. And so, then you kind of create a situation where it's like, okay, like, we're making one great run with Russell Wilson here. And maybe there's a long-term benefit where if you wind up making a real run, he's convinced that he wants to stay there longer than just the rest of this year.
Okay. Explain this to me, that Odell Beckham Jr. is not good for the Browns, but Odell Beckham Jr. is good for Seattle.
I think it has everything to do with the power of the quarterback. Okay. And I know the Browns firmly believe this. I believe it too. Baker Mayfield got better last year after Odell went down. And Baker Mayfield playing really well on Sunday against the Bengals, they don't view that as an accident either. Like, Baker Mayfield's at his best when he can go out there and play point guard, right? And when he can go out there and see the field and all five guys are live in the route, and he doesn't have to look over every 3 or 4 plays to make sure that Odell Beckham's not losing his mind because he's not getting the ball. And that's bad for a young quarterback,
yeah,
right?
But why is Russell Wilson going to be better for Odell Beckham?
Because it's the same thing as Tom Brady with Randy Moss. Like, that was the problem with Randy Moss earlier in his career with young quarterbacks, right? Then he got to New England, and the quarterback was a bigger star than he is.
Okay.
And the quarterback being a bigger star than he is, I think made a big difference, because now it's like Randy Moss could legitimately go into New England and say, I know this guy knows more than me. I know this guy has been to the mountaintop. This guy's a bigger star than I am. So in this situation, it's on me to fit in with him, not the other way around. And I think Russell Wilson probably has that sort of I guess leverage is the right word, in a relationship with his receivers. Whereas a Baker Mayfield doesn't. A Baker Mayfield, if Odell's not getting the ball and he's not happy, he's not going to point the finger at himself. If that happens with Russell Wilson, I think the dynamic is completely different. And that's why I think, you even look at when the Patriots got rid of Randy Moss, that was why, because it had sort of reverted to that. And that I think that's what every team that's considering signing him or claiming him has to take into account, is what sort of effect it's going to have on your quarterback, and whether or not your quarterback has the power to leverage the right sort of attitude out of Odell Beckham.
How does Aaron Rodgers play against Seattle this weekend?
I think he's at his best when he's in FU mode, right? And I think but
how does he get to the point where he's allowed to play? Not how does he play? Do you think he's playing against Seattle?
I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and look, I will say this. I mean, 100%. This is if he has symptoms, whatever. I don't know about that, right? That's possible that the timing doesn't work. He has another positive test, whatever, right? So he's got to get through the protocols first. But I think if he clears on Saturday, then I think he's going to play. And just having talked to Packers coaches about this over the last few days, I can tell you unequivocally, one of them said to me, if there's anyone in the league who can play without practicing during the week, it's Aaron Rodgers. And so, they're going to get Aaron Rodgers ready to play, over the next few days. And I think where this would have gotten interesting, Dan, is if Jordan Love had played really well against the Chiefs, maybe organizationally then they might say, let's get a second look at him. If they win that game, maybe they have a little more breathing room now. let's take another look at what Jordan Love looks like out here. We can gather some valuable information, and we can give Aaron the benefit of another week off. But I think based on the way Jordan Love played now, like kind of the urgency of the situation the Packers are facing, they're going to do everything they can to get him ready. I think he's going to start on Sunday so long as he clears the protocols.
Does this affect his status long-term with the Packers, in your opinion?
I think yes. Their handling of this situation is going to be really important. Now, the league's investigating this, right? So they're requesting all the video, and they're like trying to gather every piece of information they can about the way this went over the last 3 months. I think, one of the interesting pieces of this is the press conference piece of it, where like the Packers, if you look at the way they handle the press conferences, right, you can tell what happened there. Like, you don't need me to tell you. They put every other unvaccinated player on Zoom. Every single other unvaccinated player was on Zoom. Only Aaron Rodgers was going to the podium without a mask on. So the Packers can very easily say to the league, "We told him, look, like every other one of our guys is up there, right?" So how do they handle this now? Do they fall on the sword and say, "You can talk to Aaron, we've got our players back"? Or do they say, "Look at the way we handle every other one of our players"? I think that right there, because Aaron takes everything so personally, I think that right there is important, because if Aaron feels like he's being thrown under the bus by the Packers, all that goodwill over the last 3 months, I think, goes out the window. If the Packers fall on the sword here, maybe it helps them, right? Like if the Packers show we have your back, like, "Hey, Aaron, look, we traded for Randall Cobb. We went and got Whitney Merciless and Jalen Smith in the middle of the season. We're acting in a different way. We're winning with you. And now we have your back when you're in a really kind of tough spot." I think that could end up going a long way. So I don't think it's like how like the on-field piece goes. I think it's how the NFL investigation goes that could really wind up affecting where that relationship is when we get to February and March.
Thank you, Albert. We appreciate your time as always.
You got it, Dan.
That's Albert Breer, senior NFL reporter and lead strategist for Monday Morning Quarterback.